I'm so grateful to Kim Anami for coming onto my podcast and sharing her perspective on what normal sex should be. While you listen to this episode, I want to invite you to ask yourself, what is your definition of quote unquote normal sex? What is the standard that you are trying to adhere to, and where did it come from? Do you still like it? This is a wonderful demonstration of how there's different schools of thought. And just like how when people say, oh, if you want to be sober, you have to go to AA, you don't. You can find the path that works for you, and there are more than enough paths to get the result that you really want. Enjoy the episode. Has anyone ever told you about me?
No, they haven't. I have somebody on my team who's in the whole free birthing community, and not that I'm just not having babies anymore. So I support the whole movement, but I'm not in it. She had heard of you, so she shared some information with me about you.
I just heard about you. I just heard about you kind of recently, and I was like, oh my God, that's so wild because our names are so similar. And they come from, I was listening to a podcast or something of yours. I started doing my research a little while ago. Mine is Japanese. It's actually a man's name that means great wave, but I'm super interested in yours as well. It's Sanskrit, right?
Sanskrit, and it means the idea that there's always another level to go in growth, that we never hit a place of static enlightenment, like where people think, oh, now they're enlightened and that's it. It's never that way. Everybody, every being, soul always has another level to go in expansion, and that's such a theme for my life and my work that I took that on as my surname.
Awesome. That's the perfect premise for this conversation because I'm trying to go to another level in my work as well. I've been teaching sex magic to couples and individuals for the last 2 years, but I work very heavily in the psychological. So it's not somatic. Like I'm not giving people sex tips or anything like that. It's really about the concept of desire and eroticism and what makes people want to fuck, and really nothing at all to do with the mechanics of it. But when I was listening to, and I'm just want to say thank you for coming on this podcast today, because I feel like I'm a really good representative for this group of people that wants to believe, like I want to believe 122 orgasms in a session is possible. I want to believe in the throatgasm, but I'm looking at a 37-year history of clitgasms only, of a pretty meh sex life, and I want to believe that it can get better, but where I am today and where that seems is so I want to believe, but I feel I feel like I can't. So I'm really happy to kind of speak on behalf of this demographic of people, because I'm sure you deal with women like us all the time that are insisting that it couldn't work for them or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think because there's such a massive ignorance and information gap, and because these days we're in the time of everyone gets a participation trophy, there's this whole don't worry if you can't do it. It's no big deal. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, little girl. And then so on the allopathic end of things, they basically know nothing about sex, right? Like absolutely fucking nothing. And so because of that, I think the ignorance gap out there is so massive that most people just don't know what they don't know. And when there are these stories, they might seem far-fetched and, oh my God, well, that's only for her. She's unique, because we just don't hear so much about it, right? Most people are sexually stuck. Most vaginas are numb. The stats. I'll get into all this. So I'm assuming we haven't started yet. So we're just.
No, we've started.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought you shut off the recording.
Oh no, I started it. I started the recording. I had it paused when you came in, and so I started.
Okay. Well, the stats are that, over 50% of women post-childbirth have some form of pelvic organ prolapse. Up to 60% of women overall have urinary incontinence issues. And so the stats out there are horrific. The experiences of most women are dismal, far below average. And so, for the things that I'm talking about, which are these really high levels of optimization, and there's something that I say, like in my work, it's the Anami guarantee. Everyone can. Every woman can have multiple clitoral, G spot, cervical, squirting ejaculation that hits the room type orgasms. All women can shoot ping pong balls with their vaginas. Vaginas were not meant to fall out, even though that's been normalized. It's not normal. Women were not meant to be peeing their pants left, right, and center. Normalized, but not normal.
Mhm.
Every woman can be highly orgasmic, high libido, gushing with lubrication naturally at every age and stage of their life, pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, you name it. That's possible for every single woman. I guarantee it. Every man can also be multi-orgasmic. He can learn to have stamina that lasts a minimum an hour. That's the absolute bare minimum for any man, and more like hours at a time. Every man can learn to separate orgasm from ejaculation. And the big barometric question that I always ask people is, does sex leave you feeling like you are energized, rejuvenated, deeply pleasured and ecstatic, and like it changed your life? And if you're not, then you're doing it wrong. And that's not a judgment, it's not an admonition. It's just to say that there are ways of having sex that create more unconsciousness, like checking out and being dissociated. And there's ways of having sex that actually elevate and expand your consciousness. And
Mm.
I talk a lot about the psychedelics of sex, that you don't need exogenous substances. You can actually tap into your sexual energy, use that as a lever to attain higher states of consciousness. And that's what the ancient studies in Tantra and Taoist sexuality were all about, is how to use your sexual energy as a spiritual catalyst.
Mm. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had bad, how do you get into this? Have you ever had bad sex? Like, were you over there and now you're over here? Or have you always just been kind of open pleasure portals and able to be a good ambassador for this?
Look, I think that from an early age, I did have this strong awareness of my sensual sexual energy. And I had this instinctive notion that it was an energetic portal, that it wasn't just the messaging that we were getting bombarded with, that we all get bombarded with in the culture all over the world. I could tell intuitively that something was off with that, and that I had this deep inner knowing that sex was more of an awakening, a spiritual experience, an opening, like something much higher than what we were told. And some of my earlier, sexual experiences really affirmed that, where I had these psychedelic, self-actualizing experiences in sex. And I wouldn't say that every day forward, I always had amazing sex, but I think that because I had that intuitive knowing, and because I did have some really powerful experiences, like I had a cervical orgasm in my teens. That was the first orgasm I ever had, was a cervical orgasm. So that really, and the way women describe that, and I would concur, is that it's like seeing God.
Mhm.
So that really set the bar for me. This is what sex is.
Mhm.
Right. So the idea of just like busting out an orgasm to pass out wasn't how I came into it. I came into it from a much higher place of and mind altering, spirit affirming experience. And that to me is what the truth of sex is. And for whatever reason, I did seem to have an intuitive sense of that, but not because my family taught me or particular boyfriend showed me. It was really just somehow there intact. And I don't know how, but it was. And so that became a compass for me in my journeys. So then in my late teens, I was really interested in all things growth and transformation. So I was studying herbal healing, homeopathy, all kinds of alternative healing and self-healing modalities, including meditation, transpersonal psychology, all of this stuff. But when I had these sexual experiences, they were the most healing, the most transformative, the most self-realizing of anything else that I had done. And so I think, again, that really paved the way for me to do what I do now, was having that sense of, look, all these other things that I try all have some benefit, but the benefit to this work right? Learning how to consciously tap into my life force energy, the procreative energy that creates new life, was the most powerful healing modality that we literally all have at our fingertips. And yet, the programming and the censorship and the manufactured misinformation and taboo is so strong that for most people, that self knowledge is a million miles away,
Mhm.
right? The irony is it's literally in your own body. This highway super channel into the other dimensions is in your own body. It's here and it's down here as well, in the third eye and the crown chakra, and way down where the sun sometimes shines if you do yoni sunning like I do.
So I want like, and thank you so much for sharing that with me. I would love to share my story of where I come from with sex, and maybe this will explain like what the divide is, because I've had friends that have described their sexual experiences with me, from the get-go, and it seemed like they were doing something that I wasn't, whether it was being able to get off without clit stimulation, any type of like vaginal orgasms, like all of this, or even just having a good time in sex where they weren't concerned with their body. All of that seemed really far away for me. And like I've looked, and I also just want to say, like, I really like your business model. It's different than a lot of, I love the salons, I love the pricing of them. And I've been all the way through your website, kind of wondering which one I wanted to start with. But what has stopped me is like just feeling like that's not a place that I would be able to get to because of my story. So I was born into a sex cult called the Children of God. I escaped when I was 13. And I was sexually abused a lot also by my brother when I was a child. And so when I left at 13, I was just kind of like, like very turned off by sex. And of course, like the destiny with teaching sacred sexuality comes to those like least expecting it, the mission chooses you, I guess. But from age 13 to age 27, I only ever had sex because I wanted to keep a man around. Basically, I didn't have a libido. I wasn't interested in it at all. And it was really weird because I had sex with this really ugly guy one time and I had a vaginal orgasm. It was like PC muscles. Like I was like, whoa. And he was hideous and I was on like tons of Klonopin. So I had this one instance where I'm like, I know that it is possible, but I didn't know how I would be able to recreate it. I think because he was so ugly, I was like, I'm the best pussy you're ever gonna get. I'm not worried about how I look in this situation at all.
I think that's valid though.
Right.
That I like think of your inhibitions, fully surrendering, not giving a fuck. Like you probably, it sounds like you unlocked something that was other locked up.
Uh-huh. And anytime I had wet dreams, it was always about like the ugliest people, whether it was like my weird gay boss at the cheese shop or like some creepy looking person on the subway. Like basically, the more horrific you were, the more likely I was going to have like a wild sex dream about you later. And so I think that there's something, like I said, like I work exclusively in the psychological. So the understanding these little mental checkpoints that like block us from being able to get what we want. This is something that I was aware of with myself when it came to your work. Cause I'm like, I just feel like these ladies saying they're having 122 orgasms are faking it. But out of my resistance to it alone, I know that there's something there. But then fast forward, I finally meet my soulmate and I really want to I want this sex with my soulmate to reflect the uniqueness of the love that I feel for him. He's different than anyone else I've ever with. So why is the sex the same as everyone else I've ever been with? I want it to be different. But now fast forward, I'm 6 weeks postpartum with our third baby. And I'm experiencing a pelvic organ prolapse for the first time. And to me, this is really exciting because I've never had to work on my pelvic floor before. I've never really paid it any mind. I haven't really like cared about it. But after, hearing a lot of your podcasts and the concept of vaginal weightlifting and all of this work that we can do to create more sensation so that the vagina isn't just a hole, it's a part of the pussy organism that is that sensational. I'm really excited, and I feel like a distended cervix would make cervical orgasms easier for some reason. But the reason why I'm sharing this with you is that, like, I'm so happy to do the work. If I know what the work is, like, I'm so I'll do the shit out of this work, but I have to know that the results are like for real. So when people say 122 orgasms, we're talking over like a period of time, like an hour, and like for real orgasms, or like what's the deal?
Well, absolutely for real. And look, one of the staples of my work is I recommend that all couples have a weekly 3-hour sex date. So if people are talking about 122 orgasms, I'm sure that's spread out over the span of several hours or an all-night session. I mean, I did know a woman who could just pop them off like popcorn. So it is possible. And I think that the difference perhaps is when most people have an understanding of orgasm, it's with the clitoral lens, right? Of this buildup, this peak, pelvic contractions, just decline in energy, maybe even a refractory period, versus the vaginal orgasms are more like rolling hills. Like you build, you plateau, you build, you plateau, like fireworks popping off in the sky. And so it's a different experience, and they're far more emotional. They're far more energetic, emotional. They're often accompanied by women crying, laughing hysterically, even anger coming out sometimes. It's a different kind of release, right? Where the clitoral is far more physical. I would say even more superficial. Like if you rub it the right way, you're pretty much guaranteed that something's going to happen eventually. But with the vaginal orgasms, you could have all the technique 100% accurate and still not have them. So why is that? And I think that's part of why Western medicine gets very confused about this, because if they put let's just say a bunch of women in a lab and they stimulate them all the same way, then they should all be able to have these orgasms, right? But no, because they're not looking at any of these internal factors, which you have just talked about. So if we go into your situation, I would say that anybody, and look, I think for the most part, every person has experienced some degree of sexual trauma, whether that's inappropriate looking or an energy thing, or like full on to the other extreme that you've described, which is about as high up there as I think it can get. But that's going to leave reverberations. That'll leave little kinks in the nervous system, right? And so you get this mutated type of sexual expression that doesn't just flow freely out, right? That'll happen in any situation like that. And it might be small enough that people can overcome it fairly easily or adapt around it, or large enough that it creates giant interferences within the relationship and even in the body, where women start to develop menstrual issues, cysts, growths, like prolapse, incontinence, which to me, every single reproductive symptom is an expression of stuck sexual energy or mutated sexual energy. And so looking at it like that, it's like, okay, the body's telling us that there is something amiss, right? Like in my work, I'm a huge proponent of looking at the body and listening to these signs, not medicating, not putting band-aids on. I never advocate that. I've been a holistic practitioner from the beginning because that's how I live my own life, right? That's the only way that I would do it. So prolapse specifically can often be symbolic of a lack of support in some way, like not feeling supported either within, and often for new mothers because they have a huge amount of responsibility. And again, this might not have your case, but it's often the symbology. Like I look at the symbology behind the physical symptoms that get expressed. But then overall, we've had women come into this work where they've had large degrees of sexual abuse and trauma. And the irony is that the medicine is in the the origin, meaning by doing their sexual practices, going slowly and gradually and consciously, because I think that's the big thing that happens is that when there's been abuse, people dissociate, they become disconnected, they check out, they're not fully connected to and owning, and they're even afraid of their sexual energy. And so what we do in this work is very step by step, incrementally, slowly, depending on the person, is reintroduce you into that arena. And because of the power of sexual energy, it's the ultimate healer. So there was a woman, I'll give you an example. She had had a history of childhood sexual abuse, and she couldn't put her fingers inside her own vagina because her trigger was like manual stimulation. So her husband could touch her, she could have sex, but there was still a lot of restriction within their relationship, and she knew that. And so she came into my vaginal kung fu program, which is working with the jade yoni egg, and she would try to put it in and just have a full-on panic attack, like anxiety, heart pounding, total stress. And so she made a deal with herself that she would just do. And she came to me and said, this is what's happening. And I said, okay, so I want you to breathe through it and then open up to those sensations and just be with that, right? But slowly, slowly. So she set a timer, like day one, she sets a timer for 30 seconds, and she puts the egg in, or as far as she can go, even somewhat, and then has these reactions, lives through them, breathes through them, allows them to assimilate in her system. Timer goes off, she stops for that day. Next day, she puts the timer on for a minute, and then she goes through the same process the next day. And so I mean, it was within the salon, but I would say maybe halfway through, so 3 or 4 weeks, where she's fully able to use the egg. And by the end of it, she's having vaginal orgasms, talking about how she's gushing and lubricating all over the place. She felt now for the first time ever fully at home in her body, right? Where she was having like dancing naked parties around the house and fully accepting that, right? Like being in the mirror and completely loving and appreciating herself, coming to this place of self-acceptance, self-knowledge, and a reunification, because that's the separation that happens with that kind of trauma, right? Any kind of. And so for her, and this is the beauty of it, the medicine is through the origin, is through actually going into that energy. And look, I do advocate for other adjunct healing modalities if people feel they need it or want it, to support going through trauma. But in her case, and she's not alone, she was able to just address it entirely and repattern herself, repattern her neural pathways and her nervous system through that alone. Because orgasms are the biggest nervous system reset that we have. Nothing resets the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, bigger, wilder, more powerfully than orgasms. There was a doctor friend, colleague of mine years ago, and he was like, I love what you do. I wish I could just tell people the truth about this, because he was already this like renegade, always in trouble with medical boards and stuff. He's like, right, just there. But he said if people knew that this would, and he worked a lot with these modalities that were about nervous system reset, but this was 15 years ago, before that became a catchphrase in the ethers, right? He was talking about this. And so, that was my experience, but I just had never put it into those words or associated it with that physical idea of resetting my nervous system. But actually, not just as a ethereal concept, but literally doing that. So the more orgasms we have, especially the deeper vaginal orgasms, G-spot orgasms, but even more so cervical orgasms. Cervical orgasms, the cervix is connected to the vagus nerve, right? Which is thought to be the most spiritual nerve, the deepest reset nerve in the body that goes up through the heart, all the way up to the crown chakra. So on a spiritual level, when women have these cervical orgasms, they feel like this big spiritual opening is happening, but that they not literally, that they are figuratively reborn, that they feel like they are shedding old layers of the self and emerging as a truer, more authentic version of who they really are.
So, okay, I'm obsessed with all of this because it all tracks for me. I think where I've been really confused, because also, like I said, like I've been teaching sex magic for a long time, and especially and I've been researching it for a very long time. Um what I kind of do, my role as a teacher is to like aggregate and compare. So the Gnostics, the Taoists, the Tantrics, they all have very different ideas, especially on the concept of ejaculation. When is magic possible? And the conflation of ejaculation with orgasm, not just for men, but also for women, I think has created a lot of confusion about, am I doing it or am I doing it right? And they all really disagree with each other, especially the Gnostics, the ex-Christians kind of, or the progressed Christians kind of have a very strong view on what they're like, no ejaculations ever. So my job is to kind of aggregate, contrast, and compare and just see what everyone can agree on. But when it comes to these deeper vaginal orgasms, I think where I've probably been stuck and maybe not even aware that they were happening to me, not knowing what it is that I'm looking for because I'm comparing it to a clitoral orgasm, something that is exhausting, something that's very tangible. So how did you know when you had your first cervical orgasm, like, did you feel like, oh, was that it? Or I still like owe myself an orgasm? Like, can you tell me what your first experience with that cervical orgasm was? And then maybe go into a little bit of like, if you're a clitoholic, like what should you be looking for or what should you expect when you start going into different places?
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't have any knowledge at that point. I hadn't read any sex books or tantric Taoist books. I had no framework for what orgasms even were.
Mhm.
That's how young and unschooled I was. And that experience just happened through the connection I had with this person. And I guess, my own self connection that I was able to follow this thread through. So I knew I had this really powerful experience. I don't even know if I articulated at the time that it was an orgasm, right? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe I did, but I had no framework for that, right? I hadn't read anything at all. And then later, I think after that, maybe a few years after that, I had it. So to me, that was the only orgasm. I guess I eventually realized it was, or maybe just put it together. That must be. And then that was the only orgasm. Like I thought that was it. That was the point of sex, was to feel like you've been reborn. And
Mm,
that's been
okay.
right? Like I'd heard that phrase and that all made sense to me. And then I later had a clitoral orgasm, like somebody had bought me a vibrator and I was playing around with it. Again, and I didn't even know what to do with it. I was just exploring and I didn't know it went like I didn't even know what my clitoris was, I think. And had that and I'm like, well, that's fun, but it's kind of like eating a candy bar. It's like a quick sugar hit. That's kind of cool. But
Mm.
like whatever, but my vagina is where it's at. And then maybe a few years after that, had a G spot and squirting orgasms. I'm like, oh, well, that's more intense. But again, not in the realm of the queen of them all, which is cervical orgasms.
Oh, so you had a cervical orgasm before you ever had a clitoral orgasm. Oh, isn't that so cool? So you were like oh, that's really cool actually, because I I don't know if this is a correct comparison, but like I always feel really lucky that I took a lot of mushrooms before I did any other drugs because I'm like, if you want to get fucking tits out, like inside out, mushrooms are the way to do it. And because I had had that experience first, when all of my friends were getting addicted to opiates and stuff like that, I was like, there now, like that's just too expensive. Like if you want to get inside out, mushrooms are the way. And I'm really happy to have had that foundation because it made everything else pale in comparison. I think it's really cool that you had a cervical orgasm first, but that you didn't really know it was kind of like a what was that was really cool, but not uh this is my standard US Oxford Dictionary definition of a orgasm.
Most of my journey of sexual exploration was just that way, was through experiences, mostly with other people, some of them on my own, that just through following the thread, following the sparks of pleasure within the experience. There's very little things that I learned that weren't self-taught. Like there's some deeper Taoist, principles and techniques and things that I later read about that I've incorporated into my work, but they're not really sexual techniques. All the different orgasms I discovered on my own, not through reading about. And look, I think it can be handy, I suppose, but it's kind of like, to me, like in my work, what I'm most trying to do, having learned in the way that I have, is bring people to that place of being able to tap into, honor, listen to their own intuitive self, right? So that means removing, because my assertion would be that we are all fantastic, out of this world lovers. Every single person. It's not like some people are more attuned to this and look, initially they might be, or some people have more trauma or less trauma, but everyone has that innately within them. And if it's not showing up, it's like they've been cut off from it in some way. So how do we remove those layers, those blockages, that debris that is obscuring that innate knowing and connection that every single person has? So it's kind of like going to a dance class and learning a bunch of choreographed moves that, you go to a big pop concert, which I don't go to, but um and they're doing the same show every single night, the same moves, the same choreography every single night, that I find quite hollow and empty, versus somebody, who really, I guess, learns how to dance to the sound of their own internal rhythm, right? Like the moves, and they just intuitively dance and move and flow because they're letting the music move them. They're listening second by second, millisecond by millisecond to the beat, their body's responding, and they're expressing that. And to me, that's the ultimate sexual dance, whether we're doing that solo or with a partner, is we have this beautiful moment to moment awareness, understanding, interaction that's then building this incredible alchemy. And so it's not so much about teach you, oh, put your fingers here and do, like, I'm kind of uninterested. I mean, to me, mechanics is probably 10% of the equation. 90, sure, I can give a few tips here and there, but 90% of this is all about getting to that place of internal connection and then being able to live from there. And the beautiful thing about that is that when you do that in your own bed, it becomes this microcosm for your entire life. So then people go out into the world more self-expressed, less inhibited. I often say, like, it's the hallmark of becoming what I call a well-fucked woman or a well-fucked man, is you stop giving a fuck what anybody thinks about you. You are so propelled forward with wearing and inhabiting your sexual life force energy, which it is. It's a tangible energy source that we learn to become conscious of and utilize for healing, for awareness, for creativity. And we channel that out into the world and we become this unstoppable force. And we're not trying not to give a fuck. We're not trying hard to express ourselves. It's like this fountain that erupts out of us and is infused into everything we do. It changes us literally from the inside out. And people, it's one of those things where people will often be like, you're doing something different, or women will find they get this well fucked glow where, let's say, they had an evening of amazing pleasure and they go into town the next day and they're in their sweats and pumping gas, into their car, and men bolt across the parking lot to beg them for their phone number. And they're like, are you serious? They're in flip-flops and sweats, hair up, and you know what I mean? Like, disheveled as anything, but they're radiating this quality that is so palpable that people are sensing it from like 50 feet away, and they're like, I must have it, and they're just magnetized towards it. And so that's what becomes a barometer for when people really are more in touch with that energy. These are some of the things that start to happen.
So you're helping people to get into, because what if the limitation, and this is where like my work is really focused. So this is where like my interest is. What if the limitations to somebody doing work like this is just like a complete loss of libido? How do you help somebody get their libido back so they can even want to do practices like these?
I mean, there's an element of, it's kind of like For me, I'm really into exercise. I work out a lot. And the only time that I would not work out is if I got injured, right? And something happened. I had to take some time off.
Mhm.
Then getting into working out, there might need to be some initial extra kicking my own butt, some initial extra self-discipline involved to like, okay, you need to go to the gym. You need to go work out today. That just because it's like the law of momentum, right? Something that is not in motion will tend to stay still. Something in motion will then tend to stay in motion. So once I say go to the gym for like a week or maybe 5 sessions at the gym, then my body is saying to me, "Hey, aren't we going to the gym now?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, let's go to the gym." Right? It becomes effortless. So there might need to be, and like we have all kinds of different ways to start. So something like yoni gazing or yoni massage, which is less sexual so much as self reconnaissance. The
Mhm.
intention there is healing, activating, awakening. And so there's no expectation that this is going to make you feel like you want to have sex. It
Mhm.
doesn't. But it might for some people, and it may lead to that, often does, or even using the jade egg, right? Like that's a way of bringing sensation, sentience, awareness, pleasure back into the vagina, or for some people who've never had it because they've never really worked out their vaginal muscles, right? So most women are vaginally numb because they don't exercise their vaginas. And if they've had trauma or dissociation layered on top of that, they'll be even more numb. So there's a lot of practices, and then connection practices, connection with your partner, with yourself to help bridge that gap, right? And open a person back up to that again. So you don't have to go into this having a libido already. It doesn't matter. Some people really don't. But there's so many things that you can do on the road to waking things up to generate that.
Okay, cool. Now, what would you say for the I've got so many questions. I'm gonna try and keep this brief. I know, like, because I know sex like this is a possibility for me because I've had it with that ugly guy, like for sure. I know that it's a possibility. But which one of your salons focuses on this, like tapping back into your innate sexual energy, like that? Which one would you say is best aligned for like kind of getting rid of the shame or self-consciousness or whatever?
All of them do, because that's foundational, right? People come into the work at varying places. And if they're coming in, as you say, like very disconnected without libido, then every single salon begins with what I call a block clearing process, looking at the places that we might be stuck, places that we might not have even considered to be problematic or an issue, to help us create a map, right, of where we need to look and uncover. And then at the same time, doing these practices that are helping to open and awaken and revive things. So every one of my salons involves that. So when
Oh,
people ask me which one to do first, do the do the one that's coming up or that's available now or soonest. There's not a particular ideal order.
you do them live.
I do them live. The format of them is that they're 10 weeks long. The videos in them are pre-recorded in a private members area, and then I do live weekly calls to support
Oh,
the process.
okay, cool. I had never heard of a salon before until I had never heard this term before, and I thought that they were, and I really liked the pricing of them because when I saw the pricing of your work, I have an obsession with being cheap. I have like an obsession with it. Um, but I love the pricing of your work because it's just like it's pussy value. You're obviously somebody that really respects themselves and somebody that really on like there are so many people that might feel like, I have to make sure that this is accessible for each and every person. But I think that your work has like a natural kind of filtration process. Somebody has to be pretty serious about wanting to improve this area of their life and have done maybe even some foundational work getting over, the resistance that they might have to it. You said that you recommend for couples having a 3-hour session. I'll be for real with you. The only 3-hour sessions me and my husband have are watching Walking Dead. That seems like a very big commitment, especially with kids. how would you recommend, like, I'm sure people tell you this all the time, I can't make time for something like that. What's your kind
I
of
was with The Walking Dead, you just said.
well, that was a while ago. But it was when I was telling my husband about it was actually really funny because I was doing research on cervical orgasms, like, what's the deal? And, I guess your vagina can't read for a reason. You can't read your way into orgasms. At some point you have to, just get in there.
Yeah.
But I was like, it seems because I want to understand. So I'm like, it seems like cervical orgasms is consistent penetration of this spot that's uncomfortable at first for like 40 minutes. I'm like, this seems like it's the deal. And my husband's like, well, let's put an episode of Walking Dead on if I could be hitting that same spot for 40 minutes straight. I thought that was really funny. But my husband and I have a awesome relationship, and we have a very, very erotic relationship. But making time, but we're both very respectful of like each other's no. And the unique way that we came into the world of sacred sexuality and all of that was the universe has organized us in a way where we just couldn't have sex all the time, whether we wanted to or not. It just wasn't a possibility for us. I don't want to get too personal on his end. I would let it all hang out with me, but for whatever reasons, there's always been some kind of something where we couldn't have sex, whether we're being interrupted by the kids, whether we're just super tired at the end of the day. We don't have nannies. Our kids are unschooled, so we're with our kids 24/7, 365. But for whatever reasons, that just wasn't a possibility. And honestly, doesn't really sound like that much fun to me. What do you tell the couples that are struggling to make time for something like that? 'Cause it seems like a pretty big commitment.
Right. Well, I mean, straight away, when you say to me that it sounds like it's not that much fun, tells me that because you don't think it's a priority, you won't make it a priority. And I have people in my work who've got 6 children, homeschooled. They have sex every single day.
That
Young
sounds
baby,
horrible.
newborn baby.
I don't know why. Like, I don't know. I don't know why. I feel like it's just, I feel like I must be sexually repressed or something, but I'm like, oh my God, that sounds insane.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the big reframe that I try to put out there to people to help get them on board with that. And this is something I realized early on in my work. This is not about me teaching blowjob skills to people, right? It's like a woman could have all the blowjob skills in the world. If she doesn't want to suck that cock, it's not happening, right? So it doesn't matter. The skills are almost irrelevant. And when she gets in tune with that place and she's like, oh my God, this cock is manna from heaven. There's nothing that would feed me more than that. Then we're in business. So the thing that I'm trying to explain to people is that when you make love to your partner, I mean, you said you talk about sex magic. So I don't know. I'm going to just act as though I don't know that you know anything about this.
Mhm.
It's like it's a plug, right? We are energetically plugging into each other like a power socket, right? So we go and have sex, we cultivate this sexual energy, and then we bring it, we harness it, we harvest it, and then we channel that out into the world. So your intimate relationship, your sex life with your partner is actually your secret weapon. If you want to be less tired, have more sex. If you want to be more productive, have more sex. If you want to be more creative, have more sex. If you have a really busy day, you don't know how you're going to get through it, have sex in the morning at least 30 minutes. Set your alarm, get up early, start the day off with a bang. Like that is the mindset, is when you start to feel and realize that your sex life is the engine that fuels your entire life. Your sex life is the nucleus of your family. And when you and your partner are deeply, wildly, passionately, sensually connected, that energy flows out into the cell, the cellular structure of your entire family, and uplifts it. So things like saying you're tired, like I just call fucking bullshit. Having kids, I call fucking bullshit. All of these things I would say are excuses for people who probably have deeper reasons for resisting. And so if you're tired, like I don't ever advocate that people have sex at the end of the day, especially if they have a really busy life. I would be having sex dates in the morning. Set your alarm an hour early, connect with your partner, Find a time throughout the day. I'm a big advocate that children can know that their parents have sex and they enjoy it. So it's not something that we have to be like hiding from our children. It's actually better that they know that their parents love each other so much and they're that intimate. That actually creates a nourishing bond for the children and the family, that additional affirmation that their parents are really into each other. Like, how much more secure could you feel as a child knowing that? Right? The insecurity would be born out of parents who don't have very much sex, because on some level, a child would know that my parents could break up anytime, because a couple who isn't having sex is destined to break up, or not having energizing sex or life-giving sex or change your life sex.
But so many of these, like, so many of the women that I know that I would say are the most like out about being sexual and multiple orgasms and all of this. Most of these women I know aren't in partnerships or aren't in partnerships anymore. Do you find do you find that it's pretty common for somebody to reach like a personal sexual awakening and stop seeing the value in their partner? Or I mean, no.
No, I think that what happens in partnership is it's like it takes two to tango. So at some stages, it might be easier and faster to do this inner work on your own if you don't have a partner who's 100% on board, right?
Mhm.
If you have a resistant partner, reluctant partner, that will slow you down, even halt the growth in this
Yeah.
work. But if you've got somebody who's totally gung ho, is like, fuck yes, let's do this, then you will quantum leap in your relationship and your individual lives.
Yeah, that's something that we also face with our work, is that it can be really hard to get two fully consensual partners that are willing to do the work. And we teach sex magic from a different, like I said, it's like very psychological, but what we've found is that the frequent interruptions of just being a parent, the fact that it can be very hard to get 30 minutes. Like, for example, last night was a totally standard night in our family. My husband's up twice a night with the kids. I'm up all night long with the baby, mastitis, the whole shebang. And that's, for the last 7 years of our life, that's been pretty consistent, is a lot of interruptions at nighttime, waking up at different times, bed hopping, the works. But what we've found is that instead of trying to make it all happen in a session, you guys can agree to not ejaculate for a fixed period of time, and having sex like when there's not an ejaculation on the man's part and there's not a clitoral ejaculation on the woman's part. Now I'm open to redefining, what orgasm. I could probably reframe this and say that I'm having a lot of orgasms, but no ejaculations during this time. But that's also definitely true for my husband. But we would say no ejaculations. But the absence of these ejaculations creates a very erotic tension throughout the relationship and throughout the household. And we see evidence of this by increased wealth, increased creativity, increased just tenderness, adoration, and desire for one another. Like, that's really where we work, but it's not a continued session. It's just basically allowing the interruptions of your parental lives to be a guiding factor for your sexual relationship, and that these limitations create a really unique style. And
It's to that because, what I've found over the years is couples will have their stories, and I'm calling you out on this because I feel like you set this up because you kind of wanted me to call you out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So there was a couple I was working with. They had issues, there was estrangement, and he had a job that took him out of town for weeks, sometimes months at a time, right? And so that became a default excuse of like, well, we get started and get kind of connected, and then he goes away and blah, 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 right? That's their story. And you're like, yeah, it's hard to poke holes in their story. That's a legitimate story. I get it. But then as we began working together, and going through these different big issues. And every time we would have we would resolve a big issue. There would be some outer change reflecting in their life. And one of them was money, was getting money coming in. Number two was that suddenly his out of work travel changed, right? And he gets a job offer in the same city that would keep him there pretty much full time. Right. And I saw that as a representation that the barriers, the walls that they had up before that even helped construct these and support and reinforce these narratives of, oh, he works out of town, that's why this happens, we have kids, like that's why like that came crumbling down to like, okay, now I believe that on these energetic levels we create these circumstances to match up our own internal and often subconscious beliefs, fears, anxieties about things that support our story. Oh, it's really hard for us to have sex because of blah, blah, blah. So then that stuff started to come down, and then they became closer than ever. She was like this menopausal woman who was gushing, lubricating, orgasming all over the place, right? Like literally sit down and leave puddles places. And, things that are unheard of in the dominant paradigm. And having children is absolutely one of the most socially acceptable excuses not to have sex. Oh, you've got kids, you haven't had sex in 3 years. Like people would totally that would be they'd be unfazed with that. And maybe you have sex more than that, but I'm just saying people wouldn't really bat an eyelash at that. They would be like, oh, of course you've got kids. And so the people that I've worked with who have children, right? Like they talk to their kids, right? Like mommy and daddy are having connecting time and we're going into the bedroom and we really need you to respect that. We need like this much time. I don't know how old your kids are, but there's always where there's a will, there's a way. One couple, actually that couple I just mentioned that was traveling out of town, they put a trailer in the backyard. It was like, if this trailer's a rocking, don't come knocking. People find creative solutions to make sure that that connection time happens for them. And if they aren't, like, I don't buy anybody's excuses because I've seen it all. I've seen, again, like couples with 6 children, homeschooling, high-powered executive careers. They have sex every single day because they prioritize it. They know that everything else in their life will flow that much more smoothly if they are on board. And then they'll start to realize, let's say they go a couple of days, 2 or 3 days without having sex, and they start getting kind of niggly with each other. And they're like, oh yeah, we haven't had sex in 3 days. Okay, off we go. We need to go have a sex date right now.
But this is what brought me to this line of work, because I was always trying, whether it was coming from my tantric teachers, and I've been studying neo and classical tantra for a long time, since about 2016, really working with it and really working with the different techniques. And I feel like there was always these kind of quotas, like this is a healthy amount of sex to have, this is not a healthy amount of sex to have. And when my husband and I first got together, like I said, whether it was up to us or not, like it wasn't just a story. Like there were certain health issues, different things like that, that prevented us from being able to have sex and like meet these quotas. But something that I found was, even with all of these limitations, and my husband and I, after the birth of our second, we kind of went through a cooling off period that was not healthy because we both started to become interested in open relationships and stuff like that. Our relationship was just cooling off. And so we were like, oh, maybe the solution will be new people as opposed to revamping our own sex life and being able to find that with each other. But we've never been able to meet these sexual quotas yet. My husband and I, since doing this work on sex magic as a psychological process, removing shame, increasing desire, that type of trajectory, my husband and I have a better relationship than anyone else I know. We have way less sex than probably anybody else that I know, any other couple I know. And we're so tight and we're so into each other and we're so connected. And when we do get to have sex, it's awesome. Like yes, I would like to be able to use more parts of my vagina than just the clitoris. And I'm hoping that this pelvic organ prolapse is going to teach me new things about my vagina that I didn't know were there. But I have seen a lot of different couples kind of falling apart, people that are having tons of sex, but that aren't really connected in the same way. And in the spirit of wanting to just know more and go to new levels, I feel like and I really want to take one of your salons, and I'm probably going to do that right after I get off of this call, because I don't want to work exclusively in the psychological with people, but if we were to look at it like a spectrum, sex is the answer to everything on one side, sex is the answer to nothing on the other side, which is actually what it looks like in the sex magic world. Um, the truth is somewhere in the middle for me, and I'm looking to find that middle. I'm looking to find that bridge of the psychological and the somatic, and I'm looking to find that what I know can be true about the purpose of retaining semen and not ejaculating and not orgasming so much, and seeing an increase in creative energy. I'm interested in finding, and I'm also interested in advocating for the people that maybe it's like, yeah, maybe it is a story that you can't have sex so much, but maybe it's just not your style. And maybe that can be okay too. And maybe there's a way that without choreography or without scheduling, that you could create an equally strong connection, but in a way that feels very tailored to you. I don't have the answers to this, but I know what it is that I'm looking for. And I know that I'm looking for more than just the psychological, but I'm looking for something sacred in the middle. And I think that looking is just always going to be a part of who I am and what makes me me. But um, does anybody have any questions for Kim that they want to put in the chat? We'll close this up here, but please be brief on your questions in the chat, and then we'll look at that. But have you ever, do you, so I just read a book recently called Deep Work that was talking about the importance. It was like the same concept, but about productivity and about how it's really essential. Like if you want to create your best work, if we were to compare productivity with sexuality, that if you really want to have your best work, then you really need to prioritize this chunk of time, and you need to learn how to work uninterrupted for 4 to 6 hours so that you can really build that focus. And if you can't do it, you should really prioritize it. Kind of the same way where it's like you should prioritize a 3 hour sex date once a week. But then in this book, Deep Time, they bring up a chapter which is called like the Jack Dorsey case, and Jack Dorsey being the founder of Twitter. This is somebody who is super, super successful, yet is constantly interrupted, and purposely puts himself in a place where he's highly interruptible, because he calls it serendipitous interruptions. Like, and they say, we kind of just can't figure this out because it goes against everything that we talk about in deep work, yet you can't argue with the success of this man's methods. Um, do you come across anybody in your work that is that type of that loophole where you're like, wow, you're kind of doing the complete opposite of anything that I'm teaching, yet it works somehow? Have you come across anyone like that in your work?
No.
I
I
might be
mean,
it.
well, I mean, look, I could have my own interpretation of the things that you just said, right?
Yes.
But you've come here to ask me some questions and invited me here, and I've answered them. If you don't like my answers, right, you're free to take what you like and leave the rest. And I, people after Jack, like I've been doing this work personally, for like, I just did the math, like nearly 40 years.
Mm.
So, over the years of talking my own experiences and talking to other people, I'm pretty confident about everything that I say. And if I wasn't, I would say so. But, my view, I think the ultimate baseline in everything that I talk about and teach is that anything is possible. Anything is healable and recoverable and achievable for everyone. And people sometimes don't like to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They would rather hear that there's specific reasons why they can't do that. And they're the exception. Okay, maybe other people can, but I can't. And that's not how I work. I believe that everybody can. So again, like people can take what they like and leave the rest. And my work is a commitment to radical honesty and really deep excavation and permanent transformation. I don't do band-aids and short-term solutions. And people get really powerful results because of that. So there's
Cool.
a couple questions here on the
Yeah,
chat.
I'll read them to you. The first question is, what do you think about HRT for early menopause?
Look, I don't support the use of HRT anytime. And this goes on the same premise that I don't believe that women were made faulty and that they just suddenly need to have fake hormones and drugs for the rest of their lives or all of their lives if you count medicating women from puberty with hormonal birth control all the way through their lives, take a quick break to have some kids, and then by the time you're done that, you're ready for HRT. So I think that menopausal women are allopathic medicine's biggest cash cow. I have a podcast episode called Should You Take HRT? And that's on my Orgasmic Enlightenment podcast. And I actually go through the entire scam, because it's a scam, of HRT. There was a doctor who was paid to create the idea of difficult menopause back in the 60s. And he was hired by this big pharmaceutical company to go out there and talk about it and how terrible it was, and completely bankroll, like the doctors you see these days talking about it and telling women they need hormones. So I don't have the link, but I'll just type the episode name into the just should you take HRT? And then my podcast is called Orgasmic Enlightenment.
Cool. And then someone else has a question. What's the best advice for single people in harnessing these energies?
So I have another podcast called Meditate, Masturbate, Create. And this is all about a little sequence that I've come up with that teaches you how to harness and tap into your sexual energy and channel it. And that's one of the best things that you can do as a single person. Using the jade yoni egg is another excellent thing that you can do to tap into this energy.
This is a question for me. What's your most popular of all of the different salons that you teach?
I mean, for women, it's the vaginal kung fu, which is all about the jade yoni egg and how to be a well-fucked woman, which goes deeper into the different orgasms and more partner relationship. Vaginal kung fu is designed more for the solo woman. She can still have a partner, but it's really focused on you and your own self and vaginal knowledge. And then I have a salon called Sexual Mastery for Men. Oh, thanks, Rebecca, for posting that. And that's obviously for guys. And then Coming Together for Couples is my couples salon. And that actually starts in early May. So that's coming up soon.
Super cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and answering these questions. Your website is kimanami.com, correct? KIMANAMI.com. I've looked all over this website, and you guys, I'm going to be shopping around for one of these salons because I'm like, there's more to it than to me, everything is a blend of the psychological and the somatic. And I'm just determined to get more feeling in my vagina in general. And when I've said that this is something I'm looking to do, everybody recommended you. So thank you so much for coming on here and answering these questions for us. And that'll be a wrap. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.